Hey guys, the Lord's really had me studying Moses and the different processes that Moses has gone through, the different phases, if you want to call it that, of Moses. But anyway, specifically in the regards to his identity. And to be honest, I'd always considered Moses probably not a strong-hearted man. Now, he seemed like that once he started leading the Israelites through the wilderness towards the promised land. But in the process leading up to that, he never really struck me as a strong man. And I say that he tried to back out of what the Lord was wanting him to do. How many of y'all have ever been there? Oh God, don't make me do this, right? But and then he wanted his brother to be his voice, and then he doubted the Lord. Like he warred with his identity quite a bit. But what I did not know is that Moses actually was a general of the Egyptian army, and that even the Egyptians from the time of his birth knew who Moses was. So Moses knew who he was. He knew that he was a brave, valiant warrior. He knew his authority. He knew his identity. But there was a sifting and a shifting season, a transitioning season where Moses was taken into the wilderness. And you all know the story, but where the Lord wanted to prove to Moses the voice of God, right? And so he began to tell Moses, I want you to take this staff and I want you to throw it down and it's going to become a serpent. And then the serpent's going to become a snake again. And he grabbed the serpent by the hand or with his hand, right? And so then he stuck his hand in his own cloak and the cloak and his skin became white like leprosy. And then it immediately got healed. And then there was a third miracle that, that God spoke to Moses to do. Right? And he said, I want you to take this water and I want you to turn it into blood. And so Moses did. And so all of this was done in the secret place. All of this was done outside of public view, outside of, in the presence of Pharaoh, which Moses didn't want to go and be a part of. And he did it. He was learning the voice of God in the time of testing and sifting and the Passover season. And, but the thing is that was the last miracle. The water to blood was the only miracle that Moses didn't have to repeat by the time he got to Pharaoh. And what I believe it is, this is what the Lord was showing me, is that he made, because anytime there's blood, it's talking about sacrifice, it's talking about the altar, it's talking about communion. And so Moses laid his very identity on the altar at that moment, and he consecrated himself. He knew the voice of the Lord. So even if the Lord asked him to do it, he was willing to do it because he'd already done it in private. But he didn't have to because he consecrated his heart. He had allowed the Lord to circumcise him in a deeper way. He carved, I kind of envision it like this, like God carved his name on Moses's heart during that time in the wilderness, his private wilderness. And so by the time he got to Pharaoh, because Moses had bent his heart and turned his heart to the Lord, it had already made way and it made access for Pharaoh's heart to be softened at the appropriate time. Why? Because Pharaoh wasn't hardened. He was hardened all the way up to that point. But because there was a blood sacrifice, right? There was a blood sacrifice on the part of Moses at the time of his testing and his sifting. He allowed the Lord to sift his heart. So by the time he got in front of the king that wanted to kill him, that it was no longer an issue because the Lord had already taken that blood sacrifice and done a work on Moses's part and the people of Israel's part, right? He'd already done it before he even got there. So what am I saying all this? Allow the Lord to sift you and to test you in your private time. Allow him to sift you and test you, because what you allow him to sacrifice, or what you give him to sacrifice, what you sacrifice in your heart in the time of sifting, the time of cutting away, the time of circumcision, it makes a way. It's the communion. It's communion with the Lord, between you and the Lord, and it already creates an access point for the place, the giant that you're going to have to face when you go forward. So, whatever he's asking you to put on the altar, put it on the altar, because it's just for the moment. It's just for the sifting season. And we often think that, we would be okay doing all these things in private, but are we willing to do them in private? If we're not willing, we think we'll do them in public, but are we willing to do them in private? That's my question. And so that's what the Lord was really speaking to me. Like, Jamie, I want you to circumcise your heart. I want you to lay it on the altar. There's some things I want to carve off of you. And there's some things I want to deposit on the inside of you, because when you allow me, when you make that a covenant with me, then by the time I set you in front of the next giant, then it's not even a question. I've already created the pathway for you. So I hope this blesses you guys, and I will see you next time.